love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome to SDA Q&A. Good to have you all along watching. My special guest today is a good friend of mine, Mitchell Strawn. How are you going, Mitchell?
Going well, Peter, and yourself?
I'm very good. Now, we randomly caught up with each other the other day as you were visiting this illustrious town of Kurrambong, and I heard these words, Peter Dixon, as I live and breathe. What's that famous explorer, Livingstone?
Dr. Livingstone, I
Dr.
presume.
Livingstone, yes. That's how I felt. I felt like that, and it felt good. But great to have you on the show today, and you've been on before. One thing I like about our conversations is it's as if we're on CNN or Fox or one of those kind of channels where they get commentators on, and
Not Fox, please.
no Fox. Okay, sorry. Just the style of the program. You may not like the content of either for some people, and they'll invite a commentator on, and the commentator sits there. And rather like a historian looking at the past and just sharing the knowledge, they just chat about both sides. And I've always found that you have that approach. You can look at both sides, and our conversations are observational more than critical, observational more than a scrutinizing of what you believe personally. And today will be no exception to that. By the way, talking about complex conversations. Oh, and also Rochelle has just reminded me it's the last day to vote for book club. We've got SDA book club going on. Mitchell, you'd enjoy it. And we're going to announce the book tomorrow, Rochelle says. So go and vote, and you can vote on our SDA Q&A group. It's a private group, so if you're not a member in there, there's over 3,000 members, but go in. And it's right to the top of the page. Go and vote which book you would like to read as Rochelle leads this little group towards greater understanding of Adventism. And I think my favorite, not that I want to influence the vote at all, but this one has become on the cards for reading, Ronald Numbers' Ellen G. White book, Prophetess of Health, and a study of Ellen White. So that's up for vote there, but I don't want to influence anybody. But that's what I voted for. So thanks for reminding me there, Rochelle, and thanks for all the hard work you do as well. Now I think this week, and Danny is watching. She organises for me now our Good News Fellowship presenters. Just let me know in the comments, Danny. Is Emma Ray on this week? And I think Mitchell, you know Emma Ray.
Yes. I was going to say, tell her hi from me next time you see her, because I used to do Bible studies with her daughter and friends.
Nice. So I will. She will be on our gospel program this Friday or Thursday night, 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And Jane Krause says hi. She was, I think, at uni with you at Avondale.
Yes. And I believe Jane is currently in. Are you still in Canberra, Jane?
She is. Yes. She is coming to us live from Canberra.
My condolences on being in Canberra, but it's good to hear from you again. I'm actually based 30 minutes west of Jane's hometown. I'm in Toowoomba these days, so
that's right.
I get to see a bit of the landscape, and it's a nice place to be.
Toowoomba is a lovely part of the world. Now, just viewers, tomorrow is going to be a show that I've pondered dropping, to be honest. It's going to be about Charlie Kirk, the fallout, the ramifications, the thoughts on, can you speak about stuff about it at all? How is it affecting Adventism? At this stage, yes, we're going ahead. We've got a panel, and I want the goal to be that we here at SDA Q&A, even though there are going to be some wildly unshared views on this, I hope it doesn't totally destroy the channel. This might be our second last show. I hope that the very foundation of SDA Q&A is to gather together, discuss divergent views, but find common ground. And tomorrow we'll test that to the limit. So there's going to be a panel, and a lot of people I've invited have said no because it's just too much of a hot potato, Mitchell.
It's wild, honestly.
Yeah.
Like if I may, I'm not on the panel, but if I may, I'm in a Seventh-day Adventist ministers group, and I don't know how much I can share, how much is supposed to remain private, but in the group. But I did actually. So a lot of quotations have been going around removed from context, and I've got no love for the work that he did, but I did say, hey, we should look at what he said in context. I got accused of being complicit in his racism just for saying I'd like him to be critiqued for what he actually meant.
Interesting. So yeah, by simply saying I want to explore what he said, you were labelled
racist, basically,
racist
or at
and
the very least complicit in his racism.
a right wing kind of, yeah.
So it's wild. It's wild, and like I don't have any allegiance to either side of politics. I think they're both as bad as each other. But yeah, it's amazing how people put their what's the word for it? Preconceptions of who you are based on what you say, and they'll attack that version of you rather than who you really are. But
yeah, I've struggled with that very notion since I myself was at Avondale and a student in the early 80s, where I often found myself in hot water because I just wanted to discuss. I remember saying at one point, so what is it that is Des Ford's theology? This would have been maybe 82, 84, something like that, just after Glacier View. And whoa, you're a Fordite. And honestly, I love that we can have conversations. And if that conversation reveals certain things that we can then draw conclusions and further, advance our lives to safe places or whatever, that's good. But that's why I hesitated even doing the show tomorrow, because even having the conversation can be seen as being wrong. So anyway, that's tomorrow, and you're welcome to join us on the panel if you wanted to, Mitchell. But have a sleep on that one. Now, are you still with me there, Mitchell? Looks like your screen has frozen. Either that or he's gone to sleep. So hopefully my guest today joins us again in a moment. So today we are looking at the questions. I did a show about 7 questions that pastors won't discuss publicly, and then Rodrigo came on the show and he had 7 questions as well, and then he came back a month or so later, Rodrigo Custodio, and he had 7 more questions. So we've got like 21 questions all up, and don't forget, you can see his work. I'll bring it up on the screen actually a little bit later. Rodrigo Custodio has a channel called Para Que Possamos, and it's a really great channel. And nowadays you can add captions and dubbing to whatever language you want. So a lot of it is in Portuguese and Spanish, I think. You can just dub it so you can see underneath whatever language you want to follow along in. So I'm just talking, Mitchell, there about Rodrigo, who came up with these 7 questions. And
sorry about dropping that. That was
hilarious because it looked like you'd just fallen asleep. And I said to everyone, I've bored him already. So
heaven forbid.
Rodrigo Custodio has sort of put together these questions and has sent me through a PowerPoint that I hope I can work out how to bring onto the screen. Oh, well, your cough is contagious. And I will bring his channel up onto the screen too. So there's a point I really want to make as we start. This is not having a go at Adventist pastors that are ordained. I am good friends with 95% of these guys. I know a lot of the Adventist pastors, the young ones, the old ones, everyone in between. And by saying these are 7 questions that they can't answer publicly, I am not saying that they are weak or gutless. I'm trying to point out that the system, or any system that tries to stop discourse and discussion over some biblical things that could be taken either way. They are creating a very unhealthy environment for their movement. So I'm having a go, if at all, at the system, at the leadership that tries to stop the voices. I'm not having a go at the pastors themselves. So I just want that to be clear as we go into this. And today isn't about putting you under the spotlight and saying, Mitchell, answer this. And then if you can't, I might lose my job. Because you are employed by the Adventist Church. You did theology at Avondale, and you're currently teaching, or are you doing chaplaincy
Teaching, yeah.
Teaching up at Toowoomba at the Adventist school there. So I don't want to put you in an awkward position either. What we're doing today is looking at these 7 questions. So just background, I did a program, 7 questions. Rodrigo came on and did 7 questions, and then another 7 more questions. We're not going to go over all 21. We're going over the first 7 that Rodrigo put together. And we're going to look at them, and you can answer or not if you want, but the main thing is let's look at them, and let's look at why the system would say to its pastors, don't answer this publicly. Are they afraid of the answer, or are they just wanting to suppress any kind of conversation that's outside the narrative? What do you think, Mitchell? Before we start, tell me your thoughts.
Well, I'll start out by saying that I may have some that I've come to in my own, but at the same time, I'm not trying to convince anyone of my answers are correct answers or anything like that. And some of these questions as well, I've looked at and I can't give you a satisfactory answer. Either I haven't had enough time to think about it myself, or answers have stubbornly refused to turn up for me. My love for the Adventist Church is based on more than just what's in these questions. So I don't necessarily find them to be a stumbling block for me because it doesn't strike at the heart of why I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And by the same token, because my belief in what the church has to offer isn't based on whether I can answer these questions or not, I'm also not trying to convince anyone on the same merits. Like what I believe, why I believe, probably won't come up in this discussion, although if it does, all well and good. If that makes any sense.
Totally.
Like I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm just trying to come to my own understanding of things and hopefully give a little bit of clarity on the way.
And I think that's healthy. And I think a system and leadership and the politics of a church should foster that very thing. What we're exploring today is why that isn't so within the Adventist Church. Why can't a pastor come on and say, hey, I don't agree with that particular view personally. Like for example, in the case of Christopher Mindanao, who lost his job, young pastor, maybe late 30s, because he said that he believed, not on my show, on another platform, public platform podcast, that he believed the seal of God was the Holy Spirit, not the Sabbath. Now,
and it's funny that he says that because Lloyd Grollman has been saying the exact same thing, and Lloyd's always been fairly independent of the church system anyway, and he doesn't seem to have gotten flack for it, thank God.
Pastor Ben Taval that I had on the show a few weeks ago also said the same. Lloyd Grollman has said the same. They, to me, are the exception to the rule, and I do not know why they are able to fly under the radar. Now, Lloyd says, I don't have a problem speaking my mind. Yeah, and I'm going, so what? That's not the point. The point is collectively, the majority of pastors can't. And if it's the majority, something's wrong.
And it could be to a certain extent, and I'm not suggesting this of any of the pastors that I know, but it could be that if you look at what these pastors are passionate about, theology isn't necessarily it. If you're passionate about theology, you'll get your higher degrees by research and you'll end up doing a bit of teaching work. If you are passionate about ministry, while we might suggest that theology affects ministry, oftentimes most pastors won't see a direct correlation between the how many angels can stand on the head of a pin sort of question that those of us who are theology tragics might enjoy answering, and their everyday, day-to-day, how do I minister to a congregation who could very well burn me out if I let them? How do I make...
Yeah, we've lost Mitchell again there, but I would agree with what he's saying. I would just add, I was just agreeing with what you're saying there, Mitchell. I would just add that my point isn't that some ministers think, hey, I'm not into it, don't want to talk about it. That's fine. I don't care if 90% of pastors don't want to answer any of these questions because they're not interested in them, and they want to focus on feeding the hungry and clothing the homeless, that sort of thing. I totally accept that. My point is, same with women's ordination. Those who do want to be ordained, those who do want to speak up, can't. That's my point. I don't care if women's ordination becomes an official thing and 2 women in the world decide that they want to be ordained. That's not my point. My point is that at this stage, they can't. So when you use silencing and suppressing people as a weapon, that's what my issue is. And I don't know why people have such a hard time understanding that that's my point. Can you help me clarify my point better?
Sure, I'll do what I can. But yeah, I think when it comes to, like you're saying, what is it about the system that causes, that requires this uniformity? I think to a certain extent that's true of every system. If we're to look at, say, a congregational model of church governance, the pastor is beholden to what the congregants want to hear, to a certain extent. If you've got a church that trusts their pastor and gives them the freedom to say what they, where the Spirit is leading them, that's all very well and good. But sometimes you get churches that don't do that. Sometimes you get churches that, and it's kind of the same in the Seventh-day Adventist system, but writ large. The Seventh-day Adventist Church wants to employ a pastor that preaches what the Seventh-day Adventist Church believes in the 28 fundamentals. That is the litmus test. That is the standard for what a church pastor should be believing and teaching. Although, as I'm sure you'd agree, there are conversations about how many or how few of the 28 fundamentals can you adhere to and still consider yourself an Adventist.
Yeah, that's true. I guess my point has been that Adventists do the suppression trick and the silencing trick a little bit more than the average movement, the average Protestant church. For sure, we've got the Anglicans here in Australia, and they've got the high and low church, the same as the Episcopalians they are for our USA friends. So in Australia, if you feel like you're more on the side of the high church, the more fundamental, the more traditional, you just go to one of those churches. And you might disagree with your brothers and sisters that go to the other more happy, clappy, praise and worship Anglican version. But they're not trying as a leadership to, yes, they try and, ensure that people aren't fighting each other too much and splitting the church, but they aren't suppressing and they aren't controlling the narrative to be this one kind of, what do they call it? Unity through uniformity. That's what Adventism comes across as.
But let's and I know you're using the Anglicans just as an example, and that's, I'm probably not touching on what you're getting at here, but the Anglicans themselves are an interesting case because they deliberately have a broad church. That's what they call it. There is the implicit understanding in Anglicanism that ever since the Reformation, you're going to have people who identify more with the Anglo-Catholic tradition, and you're going to have people who identify with more of the Reformers. And Anglicanism has to accept this because it's been this way for 500 years. And you can go to an Anglican church and you can have a great deal of disagreement, but you have to accept that you share that church with people, which obviously is very different for the Adventist church, because not only do we have one set of one set of doctrines that came about out of a movement, but we also have one prophet as well, and
Yes.
that tends to lead to a little bit more consolidation.
Right. So what you're saying is that, sorry, am I still here? What you're saying is that Adventism has a specific and unique message that can't be messed with too much.
Yes, and if you start tinkering around the edges, people start asking questions of, well, if you're messing around the edges here, do you actually believe what's in the middle? Because obviously we believe that what's in the edges comes out from what's in the middle. So
Exactly.
do you still have faith in the core message of the church that you claim to be a part of and
Yes.
that you claim to represent?
And this is where I defend the traditional Adventists' right to actually control the narrative of their church. And I believe the good guys, the gospel Adventists that have been telling us for decades that, hey, we're an open tent, a big tent. We're a group of people that allow diversity. We love that you can all be involved and we want you to be involved. But then on the other hand, they realize they can't ask the questions. So on the one hand, I support the traditional Adventists, and I support their and Ted Wilson's desire, now Ayrton Kohler's desire, to make this church more united through uniformity, because it has a distinct message. So those who want this big, broader church in Adventism, essentially, they can't speak up and get it. Let me, for the millionth time, point out that those who like broad Adventism release a book on broad Adventism, putting Ellen White into perspective, and they get cancelled. So I guess I can see totally that the Adventist church has every right at a leadership level to shut down any dissent that goes too far from its core pillars. I get that. I support that, actually.
I actually don't, but we can get into that later.
Well, you're on the one hand saying that you can see why the church needs to not be Anglican and have high and broad church.
Oh no, I say the Anglican church. Sorry if I misunderstood. I didn't explain myself clearly enough. I'm suggesting the Anglican church, that's the way they do it. We don't necessarily do that. I would love to see us become a lot more like the Anglican church in that regard.
Yes, and I know that, and I guess my point is that those who would like to see it happen, those who want it to happen, for the last 150 years, whenever they've tried to make it happen, it doesn't happen.
Including Ellen White in 1888.
She made a step towards it, but it didn't happen. So it's not like the Anglicans where it did happen. So my point is, those who have this notion of a broader church, to be able to answer these 7 questions and have a big discussion and just still be accepted, are hoping that this will unfold in spite of the evidence that it never does. So I guess I'm interested in yours and other gospel Adventists and those who want the broad church experience. I'm interested in why you guys have such endless Pollyanna type hope that it will happen one day, because the evidence is there. The data is in. It is not happening. It has never happened. And I dare say it never will.
Well, you describe it as Pollyanna, and I can understand why you'd see it that way, but you know a little bit of my story, and you know the sort of stuff I've had to go through at the hands of people in the church. And I wouldn't characterize my particular hope as... Of course. I wouldn't characterize it as Pollyanna-ish, though. Or naive. Like, I know exactly what the church is capable of, but at the same time, what is God's will for his people? Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the remnant church. And the reason I have to back that up is we were specifically told in theology class, the Seventh-day Adventist Church isn't the remnant church, it has the remnant message. So we are not the only church through whom God is working. And people who are a little bit, like even people who would consider themselves more conservative in our church would still have to acknowledge that God's Spirit is present in different denominations to a greater or lesser extent. Now, given that we are part of this denomination, I find myself wondering, what is God's will for this denomination? If he, as the conservatives claim, raised us for a particular purpose, and that purpose was to make known the soon coming of Jesus' return and the need to, in particular, the Sabbath, but the great controversy, follow God out of love rather than out of fear and coercion. And that's written into the DNA of our church, because as soon as we got started, Sunday laws started coming in. Like, when we look at the whole Sunday law thing, traditional Adventists very much hold to Sunday laws as a hallmark of what's going to happen at the end times. What a lot of us fail to realize is that was a reality for the first Adventists. The Sunday laws were not a future thing. They were there. Ellen White had to give counsel. How do you deal with being a Sabbath-keeping Christian in a place that demands that you not work on Sunday? They were expecting the Sunday laws to go further, and they didn't, and I'm sure that's a discussion that can be had. But this idea of worship that is coerced versus worship that is freely given is vital to our DNA as Adventists, and that's part of what our message is. And I can't remember where I was going.
I think you're trying to say that, what does God want? Does God want a broad church, or does God want a more specific church? And my point is that I don't think God wants Adventism. Sorry, we've lost me again. I don't think God necessarily wants Adventism to be. I don't think God wants Adventism to be. Well, I think. No, I won't say what God wants, but I will say that there are two viable versions of Adventism. This conservative Adventism you speak of about the Sabbath and the Sunday law and that kind of thing, don't forget that its very main core teaching is to raise up a people that will stand in the time of trouble, post close of probation, pre-second coming, not sinning, because Satan said you can't do that. That's Adventists' core teaching. The reason it came into being, the reason the traditional Adventists want to keep Adventism from being a broad church. So the broad guys, they come along and water down that message. So my point, I'm saying that a lot today, lots of points, is that there really is two churches in one. There is the church that wants to be broad, and in that church, there are lots of categories. They don't like being defined. Fine. But that's a broad church. It's a big tent church. There's another kind of Adventism that also carries a valid reason for being that is specific and unique to the pillars of Adventism, and it has a goal to prove Satan's claim wrong and to vindicate God one day. And they have every right to not water down that teaching. So here we are, looking at these 7 questions, looking at Adventist pastors who can't answer them, looking at this broad kind of discussion that we'd all like, that has never taken place within Adventism for very long. And we're trying to say, what is the system doing about that? My point, again, is the system is doing nothing about it. It allows it to squander and fight amongst the grassroots, which they've done. Most towns, Toowoomba included, has 2 churches, one that's broad, one that's conservative. And that is found all around the world. And if we could have these broad discussions, it would be a different church. So where do we go with that knowledge?
And like I keep saying, like, you raise a valid point. Like, obviously the traditional Adventists have a reason for being, and they have a right to have that message, given importance and preeminence in what we do as a church. And I'm not questioning their right to do so, but I will, however, gently push back on what you're saying about is that the only valid expression of Adventism that deserves
a voice,
word for it,
representation, a home. It's not the only Adventism. Adventism, the broad Adventism, deserves a voice, deserves a home. I'm saying it's not getting it. They're not getting a home. They're not getting a voice. And those who, like when I interviewed Ron Kelly the other day, he pointed out very clearly that the new theology of the broad Adventist that would like to speak up about these 7 questions that we will get to, they unravel traditional Adventism. So it's not just that the two can have a voice. The traditional Adventists believe that you guys unravel their message. You're a threat. The broad Big Ten Adventist is a threat.
And I'd love to, and maybe I haven't been watching enough of these podcasts, but I'd love to hear from some traditional Adventists exactly what it is about broad church Adventism that they feel is such a threat. Do you have any ideas?
Oh, 100%. The broad church Adventist questions this idea that after probation closes, a people will rise up that will not sin and will have no intercessor. They question the validity of 1844 even happening, that it might just be symbolic, providential. They question that the Adventist teaching the atonement happened but wasn't completed on the cross. They say it was completed at the cross. So the very existence of the broad Adventist, you guys, threatens the very core, demonstrably, of the traditional Adventist message. And it's very clear that those who lean to a forward message have to then question the authority of Ellen White. The traditional Adventist does not want to do that. Like for gospel Adventists, and you're not the only one, for them to not even realize the disastrous impact they're having on the traditional Adventist is mind-numbing to me. Like, you guys are going in and kicking the heck out of these guys and destroying their religion. Leave them alone.
If I may, though, is it that it represents a threat to their teaching, or is it that it represents a threat to the political structures that have been built up? Look at it this way. You've brought out. I'm so glad that you've got a paper copy of Reclaiming the Prophet. I want one of those so badly. I've got the download PDF.
When Mitchell comes back, I'll let him know that I'll try and get him a copy. Mitchell, I will try and get you a copy of that. The thing is, the threat is not at the politics, though, yes, that it's true. Part of it is. The threat of all the points I just listed are theological. The authority of Ellen White. Was she a prophet? Did something happen in 1844? It, of course, affects them politically, but what they are most worried about is not the politics. They're worried about their very remnant chosen message, the unique 3 angels message. They're threatened that is being watered down, and they are right to threat that.
Can you explain that to me? Because I do believe in the 3 angels messages. I failed to see how the gospel Adventist message waters down what Adventism stands for. That is, calling forward to the soon coming of Christ and calling people to appreciate who God is in love rather than in coercion.
I think you're just rabbiting talking points that have been passed on to you from theology majors and leaders that are trying to quell all the problems. They love to go, but we love Jesus, we love the Sabbath, And we've got institutions, and we've got churches, and
with respect, I do.
education and hospitals. The fact is, you guys, the broad Adventists, by questioning one thing, let's say we're questioning October 22, 1844. A lot of them actually don't come to that date. A lot of the scholars
Okay, but here's the thing:
don't come to that date.
I don't question 1844.
Yeah. So again, I'm speaking collectively, you guys. That's why I'm doing this.
Sure,
These guys here will all say, I don't question 1844. Okay, so you believe in the 470, the 2,300 days. Do you believe they all get to that date?
I personally do.
And so collectively speaking, though, the Gospel Adventist challenges the notion that then means the atonement at the cross wasn't completed at the cross. But you would believe it's completed at the cross.
I would believe it's completed at the cross. What I was taught in theology class, this comes from my lecturers, Wendy Jackson, Murray House, all of them back in the day. And Wendy is still here at Avondale College as the head of theology. So I feel like I've got a right to say what I was told here. The investigative judgment, as it is now taught in theology classes, acknowledges that the atonement on behalf of, like, the believer's atonement was completed at the cross. That's, though we were specifically taught that. What we were instead taught, and I'll suggest that this is also by Gibson's TruthLink studies, because this is what I've come across when I've been doing that. So it's not just at Avondale. This is reflected in some of the newer material that's come out of the church-affiliated organizations. Ty Gibson, Wendy Jackson, they suggest that the investigative judgment has nothing to do with the believer's individual salvation. It has to do with the vindication of the character of God. So
you believe that?
That's my understanding. That is my belief that the
God is to be
investigative
vindicated.
Because that is specifically that's mentioned as what we do in the Great Controversy. Great Controversy, as I don't need to repeat it, but I'm going to repeat it for the sake of the argument, so that we have an argument that follows. Great Controversy says that Satan accused God of being a tyrant. God, so he then has to prove that he has given everybody an opportunity to freely choose.
You're aware, though, that the traditional Adventists want anyone that has a whiff of new theology and questioning the authority of Ellen White and some of her visions, and maybe you're not. Maybe you are more of a traditional Adventist than I thought, which is
I like
okay
to
as well.
That fine line.
But you are aware that there's a very strong movement within the church that doesn't want you guys in it.
Yes, I'm well aware.
Why is that? Why don't they want you?
That's what I'm hoping you can explain to me, because I can't understand why they're so why Ted Wilson, for example, says if you don't hold to a literal 6-day creation, then just go leave the church. I don't understand why we can't have those discussions.
I think it's because of this, that your generation, my generation, older than you, have a generation above us of very clever academics and scholars who don't want to leave the church. They're cultural Adventists, and they've gone, whoa, this theology does not blend. The new theology and the traditional theology, the more gospel theology, the traditional theology of Ellen White as kind of prophetess, doesn't blend. And so what they did all through the 80s, through when I was at college, through when you were at college, through those in the 90s, they cleverly gave everybody a chance to, with a lot of cognitive dissonance involved, they cleverly gave, just bring Mitchell back, they cleverly taught in the institutions such an incredibly blended version of 1844 and the gospel, atonement, the gospel, pre-Advent message and the gospel. They blended it so cleverly together that people like you and I think we actually do believe in traditional Adventism. I spent my life going, oh, yes, I believe in 1844. It's slightly differently than perhaps the traditional Adventists. No, we just believed the lie that the scholars and academics and clever pastors told us, that it was the same thing. Hey, but we've got the Sabbath. They just were so, like when I interviewed Alden Thompson the other day, I realized that that's a clever mind that wants to remain an Adventist for largely cultural reasons, and so is bent over backwards putting square pegs into round holes. And the generations that followed looked on with admiration and believed everything they said, but didn't look too deeply into it. We didn't look too deeply into why do the traditional Adventists want us gone. We said it's our standards. They don't like our music. They don't like our hair. They don't like the. No, it's the theology. The theology is everything. And you and I have fallen at the feet of clever teaching that has convinced us that, no, the theology isn't that different after all. We're the same. Ted Wilson's theology and my theology is the same. I'm suggesting it's not, and we've been hoodwinked.
Sure, I accept that you're saying that, but one thing I will suggest as well is that, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, unless we can have these discussions openly, we will continue to hemorrhage younger members. And I'm going to speak very very personally right now. I've had close family members, quite a few of them, who have left the church over questions of Ellen White, because what I taught, they haven't read More Than a Prophet, they haven't read Reclaiming the Prophet. That's not the image of Ellen White that they were given any window into. And as a result, they've thrown away the Adventist message. And this is getting to the reason why I love the Adventist message, because I think quite apart from Ellen White, we genuinely do have the best exposition of the gospel. We don't have an eternally burning hell. We have a belief in free will that causes people to come to God because they want to, not out of fear, etc., etc. And now I've got close family members who are going to Sunday churches that do believe in hell, that do have a much harsher belief on marriage, divorce, remarriage, etc. And we have something beautiful in Adventism, in that we are a conservative denomination that believes the Bible's infallibility, not inerrancy, infallibility. And it seems to me that this Ellen White, the way we treat Ellen White is the biggest stumbling block for our people. And so we lose so much.
I agree with you. And I wish that the church had allowed for this kind of conversation. Someone just messaged me on the phone and said, "Stop giving Mitchell a hard time." You and I know each other. We talk.
It's fine. Whoever's listening, I love arguing.
Yeah, and Mitchell and I love this kind of conversation, and this kind of conversation leads to positive results. And the whole point of today's conversation is saying, why aren't we allowed to have these very conversations? So look, let's get into the 7 questions. I just want to quickly bring up from Rochelle here. She's mentioned about the Charlie Kirk conversation we're having tomorrow, that it's a good idea to focus on the SDA reactions rather than the politics. And I agree with that. And it's interesting that today we're looking at not so much what the SDAs think and believe as we dive into these questions. And that's why I thought her comment was pertinent. We are looking at the politics. Why are the politics stopping this kind of conversation? My opinion is the kind of Adventism you love and believe in is unable and will never be able to nestle in to the Adventist movement. You will always, from here to eternity, have the traditional Adventists deeply want you out. They know why they want you out. It's sad that the gospel Adventists don't clearly realize why. I do know, I think, in my humble opinion, it's because in the 80s and the 70s, the good guys revealed a lot about Ellen White, but they tried their best and succeeded in convincing people like you and I, with their tricky-dicky, clever words, how to make Adventism fit with the gospel. The reality is there's a lot of evidence to suggest that Ellen White's visions weren't from God, and maybe she was devotional and inspirational, but there's some evidence to suggest that when she claimed William Miller was correct with the dates but wasn't with the event, that she was wrong with that. There's a lot, most theologians and Adventist theologians will agree that the dates do not add up to October 22, 1844, clearly. And so if that's the case, and this is what Des Ford taught, that the dates don't add up, if they don't add up, what does that say about the authority of Ellen White? What does it say about her visionary claims that she's even a messenger, that she hears from God? If God told her that those dates are correct and we find out they're not, to me, that has huge ramifications. But these guys, these many George Knight, McAdams, Gil Valentine, these guys that we love and idolize to some degree because of their incredible intelligence. I love their work. But these guys, when trying to place her into a better position of being, an inspirational woman and water down the prophetic notion, are totally blindsiding and diverting our attention from the fact then, if she said God told her the dates were correct and they say they're not correct, what does that say? That means she's false. That means she's saying God told her something that they're saying didn't. So they're saying on the one hand, God didn't tell her these dates, but let's make it fit anyway. She's not false.
So
she gave a false claim. She's not false.
I assume you've read Graham Bradford's More Than a Prophet?
Yes, and yes, I found it very lightweight, to be honest, and I really like him. I love his family, no criticism, but I feel his hands were tied as well. And I think all of these guys try and justify Ellen and place her in a position of authority without giving her that authority. They don't want to throw her out, and people say, "Oh, we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater," but they have proved to me for decades, these authors, that Ellen White's claims that those dates are accurate aren't. Look, and then I go, well, that means she's made a false claim.
Look,
oh no, she didn't.
I'm going to say something that is just going to straight out, as you say, disqualify me from church employment. Because, and not necessarily to say that I necessarily agree or disagree or whatever, but the simple fact that I've said something that could be construed a little bit iffy by church members means that people wouldn't feel comfortable with me being their pastor if I were to say this. But we have put Ellen White on a pedestal for way too long, and we've raised her, like the standard that we hold her inspiration to is above that of even the Bible writers. And some kind of correction to that needs to happen. And like we've mentioned, like we keep saying, I'd say we're both despairing of the possibility of that correction happening, because of the need of our more conservative part of the church to have an absolutely inerrant prophet, despite the fact that we believe in an infallible.
Yeah, see, the problem is you Graham Bradford's, and may rest in peace, fantastic guy, really, really got on with him as a person, and I would have said in some of my discussions with him, though they were rare, that I disagreed with him. He would push the narrative that, well, she was a normal human and flawed and made mistakes. That is not the point. Yes, we know that. That's not rocket science. What we're saying is she said God told her that these dates were correct. These guys, the good guys, possibly even including Graham, would say, maybe Miller even got the dates wrong. Elephant in the room. She said God told her they were right. And so here they are telling us these mixed messages. She got it wrong. Oh, did she just see the vision wrong? Some even say, oh, God had his hand over something. She didn't see the dates quite. And come on. That the pivotal moment of Adventism's creation is that night, October 22. Something happened in heaven, spiritually, supernaturally, that was going to be a message relayed to the whole world that would usher in the second coming. That's how important it was. And so on the one hand, they're proving that she got the dates wrong, but they're then defending that she is still a messenger of God, when that very message that was the pivotal pillar point, the only unique teaching of Adventism, the date was wrong. So yeah, I just feel like the cognitive dissonance amongst these guys is brewing and burning strong. You can't say the message is false but she's not a false prophet. You can't have both.
I actually disagree with that, but we're not gonna resolve this here. So
because you do believe the dates were accurately, that William's dates are correct. Is that what you're saying?
Look, I've seen nothing to question my understanding of that. So we're coming at it from different.
And I respect that. That means you've looked at the data and you've drawn your conclusions. I respect that.
Well, have I looked at the data? I'm contending here that I haven't looked at the data. So who knows? That might be the case. I don't know. I haven't done enough research to be able to say. But the other thing is too, I have a different view of what it means to be a prophet and to be a false prophet. So I think if we wouldn't agree on that definition necessarily, and that'll come out as we talk about the questions, but because I have a different view of what prophecy actually looks like to begin with.
We've lost Mitchell again there. There's something going on up there in Toowoomba, Mitchell.
I'm going off my phone internet, so it's probably going to keep dropping out because for some reason my phone. Yeah, probably. I do apologize.
So you have and I think Graham and all these guys have a different definition of what a prophet is.
Yes.
I would say they should have called the book Revising the Prophet. Bob Wolfgram suggested that. That's not an original idea, but I agree with him. I think that Ellen herself, if she was here, she would not like the new theology guys. She would not like the broader church. And you can tell that in 1888. She loved the new theology guys, Wagner and Jones. She supported their right to speak. She even greatly criticized Butler publicly about his anti-Wagner and Jones views. But later, she slipped back into not supporting where they went with it. And both Wagner and Jones ended up, I think, leaving the church and taking on quite different views to Adventism as they progressed on their journey. But I love these conversations. Thank you, Mitchell. It's fantastic. And I guess what we're saying is that this kind of conversation, and I know a lot of pastors are watching now. We've got a big audience watching, and I know a lot of these guys are watching, and I know they would love to be on the show. They write to me. They would love to be chatting.
And I'd love to be in parishes. I'd love to be in a parish like they are, but unfortunately that's not going to happen.
Well, they aren't in a parish where they can do it publicly. They wish they could. They're watching with envy, and I hope they know that I'm not attacking them. I totally get it. We're talking today about the politics of the church, and my guest is Mitchell Strawn, and we're talking about why is it that maybe these questions can't be answered publicly. We're going to go to them now. Now, Mitchell, I'm not throwing this onto you last minute as a trap, but Rodrigo is watching, and I thought let's invite him on.
Oh yeah.
Only in that if you're dropping off, we can keep the conversation going, and only because some of the questions, I was looking at them this morning and I thought, I wish Rodrigo could come on because he can clarify some of the questions a little bit better for both of us. So the theme concept's not changing, but if you're okay with it, we will just bring him on just so that he can.
Of course, I have somewhere to be at too, but I'm free.
And we'll be finished before then, but he will be able to clarify some of the questions for me. So I've just sent him the link, and it'll be good to have Rodrigo. Rodrigo and I met when I was in Riverside last year in California, and we went out to dinner a couple of times at the local Mexican cafes and restaurants, which are everywhere around the San Bernardino Valley. Is that it? And we got on like a house on fire. You'll really enjoy. He's a great guy. So he'll be coming on in a minute. While we're waiting for that, and great to see all the. I don't know if you've been watching the comments.
I haven't. I have no idea what
it's a good idea not to, but there's some really some fantastic comments going on here. It's really great. So keep that up, everyone, and I don't mind if the conversations in the comments go onto different seams of gold either. Okay, let's see if we can get this PowerPoint going. Can you see there? 7
Yes,
questions to ask your local pastor. This was reframed a little bit. I'm just going to send another message to Rodrigo. So these are basically the questions that we think pastors can't answer publicly, and when we did this particular program, we were saying they can't do it on the show. Go and ask them privately. So anyone watching, now that we're an hour in and sort of starting the show, but we've set the scene.
This happens
We've
every
set the
time
scene very well. It happens every time the show goes live. So we've set the scene, and those watching that are Adventists and you'd like some questions to ask your pastor, go and ask him these questions. So let's bring the first one up, and hopefully Rodrigo will join us any minute, because there's definitely a few that I do need his clarification on. But question 1, should we consider all of Ellen White's statements that begin with phrases like, I saw, God showed me, the angel said, the Spirit of the Lord rested upon me, my angel showed me, I was taken to, said the Lord, to be infallible and without error? And this will help you explain your view of what a prophet is too.
Do you want my opinion first, or do you want the church's opinion first?
I think I would love your opinion as well. And so perhaps let's do it this way. You share your opinion on the question. You share what you think the church believes as a general body, collective, and then share why you think a pastor may not answer it. And here's Rodrigo. We'll bring Rodrigo in. Hey, Rodrigo, good to see you.
Hey, guys. How's everything?
Good. This is Mitchell and Rodrigo, Mitchell. And I was just saying, Rodrigo, you're a great guy, and the three of us would get on really well at a cafe or a nice Mexican restaurant. And so we've got Mitchell's camera occasionally dropping out, but that's okay. So what's great is that Rodrigo put these 7 questions together, made the PowerPoint, and as I've said, go and check out his incredible site, which I'll bring up on the screen again later. But I'm pleased that Rodrigo's here, because some of the questions I needed a bit more clarification. So we're setting the scene here, Rodrigo. Mitchell is going to answer his personal view on the question, what he thinks the church's collective view is, and why he thinks Adventist pastors don't want to answer these questions publicly. So we've just read this one, and Mitchell's going to, we'll give Mitchell first shot each time, and then if there's anything you want to add and clarify, go for it. So over to you, Mitchell.
Sure. Okay, so I'll start with the church's opinion first, because I feel like I should do that. The church would obviously say, yes, infallible without error. And I would suggest the reason why we do this is because post-1919, Ellen White has been held up as a, how do I put this, figurehead. What she says and what she personally believes and the way that she lives her life and all of that is not nearly as important to the church as the fact that we have an infallible, inerrant person who can provide us with certainty in these times. I think that's honestly what it comes down to. We've been wrestling with the Bible for the 3,000 years that bits of it have been in existence, and any of us who have been in the Christian faith for a long time will know that there aren't easy answers even from the Bible. But, and this is the bit I can't understand, why do we need to have easy answers from about Ellen White, from her works? Why do we even need to have answers from Ellen White's works at all? especially considering she herself said, lay Sister White to one side and don't touch it until you can quote the Bible. And I can't quote the Bible off by heart. Therefore, I have made the practice of focusing on the Bible until such time as I can quote it, to a degree of comfort, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So when it comes to why a pastor wouldn't want to answer this question, obviously you might suggest that there are things that we would consider errant about what she's seen. Now, following Bradford, we could suggest that she might not have understood it fully. Bradford obviously quotes the example of Agabus in Acts, who notes that the Jews will hand over Paul to the Romans, where it is in fact the Romans who rescue Paul from the Jews who want to kill him. So we have an example of prophecy not being entirely 100% like the way that it was prophesied in the New Testament. And Bradford would argue that implies that the New Testament prophecy, the role of New Testament prophecy is, it does allow for a little bit of, errancy here and there. And the role of prophecy in the New Testament is strengthening, encouraging, comfort. It's not correct doctrine, etc., because that's the role of the teachers. That's what Bradford would say. I would agree with that personally. So I look at this and I say, no, I don't think she has to be correct, because her purpose isn't to be correct. Her purpose is to provide comfort to people who had lost their way. And I think the result of her ministry kept more people faithful to God than otherwise would have happened if people had lost faith in God entirely because of a false prophecy, if that makes sense.
I'm going to hand that over to Rodrigo, and just a quick comment. I'll try. So it's a great little format here. We'll ask the question. Mitchell will say what he believes the church believes, why pastors may not answer it, and then what he believes if he wants to. I'll then open it to the floor and Rodrigo. And I think Rochelle says, genuine question, if your opinion differs from the church opinion, why are you in that church? How much are you okay with disagreeing with and still consider yourself affiliated? It's a good question, because if you disagreed with all of these 7 questions, and as I've said, we've got 21 altogether, we're only looking at 7 today. That's a good question that Rochelle has raised there. What are your thoughts there, Mitchell?
Okay, so I'm going to preface what I say with a thing that was told to me by a church leader. I asked him at a ministers' meeting, which I happened to be invited to because I was doing volunteer ministry at the time. Each different denomination seems to attract a different kind of people. The Anglicans tend to attract more mellow sort of people because they've got the broad church. Pentecostals tend to attract like creative, expressive sort of people. What kind of people, I asked him, does the Seventh-day Adventist Church attract? And he thought for a bit and then said, people who like to be right. And I guess that's the main reason why I'm an Adventist, to be right.
That's a good, honest answer. We've lost Mitchell again there, Rodrigo. So let's just we'll bring him back on. He always comes back in a second or two. Yeah, good answer. And I think Rochelle wrote, no, Ellen's role is not as comforter. She says her words are barricaded by "Thus saith the Lord," and says her words are God's words, and it was her job to make sure everyone followed them.
With respect, I'm sure Rochelle's a good person, and I'm sure we'd get along if we met, but the role of prophecy is strengthening, encouraging, comfort. So it is biblically correct to say that if Ellen White is a prophet, then she must have comforting as part of her role. And I would say I personally have been comforted by the things that she's written in the past, not recently because I haven't read anything recently. But That's my recollection on that. But what I was going to say was, even laying Ellen White entirely aside, I see that Seventh-day Adventism has the best biblical appreciation of teachings like hell. We skirt away from the extremes of the marriage, divorce, remarriage stuff that's happening. Like if people get divorced in the Adventist church, no one really cares these days. And I think there's a certain amount of grace in that doesn't exist in other congregations. Pentecostals tend to be a lot more conservative than us. Yes, they might worship quite expressively, but they are far more conservative theologically than we are. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question? It's not that I think we're right. As a matter of fact, the fact that we believe in progressive revelation means that by necessity we have to be wrong as a church. And this is the thing that bothers, and I've said as much up the front of the front church in Springwood in a sermon that I gave. Something. But the fact that we have that as part of what we say we're supposed to believe makes me feel comfortable with staying here, because I believe that we can learn and we can grow. As much as you might disagree because of the traditionals.
And we'll see if Rochelle replies to that. Rodrigo, some thoughts from you.
Thank you guys for the opportunity to jump in, and yeah, it's a great conversation, and have the opportunity to have a pastor or a person that really understand maybe both sides of the coin, right? Which is the challenge today for most of the pastors in the SDA organization, understand both sides of the coin. And I have here the vote of confidence on Ellen White writings from 2022 General Conference. And that says specifically this, it's part of the vote, but it's the most important part, which says, we believe that the writings of Ellen G. White were inspired by the Holy Spirit and are Christ-centered and Bible-based. Rather than replacing Scripture, they uplift its normative character, safeguard the church from every wind of doctrine, and offer an inspired guide to Bible passages without exhausting their meaning or preventing further study. And this part that I think is the part that I concentrate a little bit more. They also help us to overcome the human tendency to accept from the Bible what we like and to distort or disregard what we do not like.
Yes.
So that is a part of a paragraph, but a part of the vote of confidence on Ellen White from 2022. So my take from this question, actually, following up the answer that he gave, is I believe today, being very pragmatic, today people do have access to the Bible. They do have access to the Word of God. We are living a generation and a time in history that people do have access to the Word of God completely in so many translations and so many variations. So the role of Ellen White today for Christianity, I'm not talking about only the Seventh-day Adventist community, for the Christianity, and the impact of her writings is losing strength. Why is losing strength? Because people have more access to the Word of God, and also have more access to even deeper understandings that we never had before in the 19th century. So if you just take from the perspective of a minor light or lesser light, that we usually say in the SDA church, that role is getting smaller and smaller and smaller because people have more and more access to the Word of God. So whatever she said on this specific, the angel showed me, God showed me this and this and that, actually is losing strength. And the challenge of the SDA church is actually hold their writings at the same time when people do have access to the Word of God. So this is the challenge. And one day, probably the SDA church will have to make the decision, yeah, she's a devotional now. Let's focus on the Word of God. This is my perspective.
And I think too, just before you jump in there, Mitchell, I think too that the broader church that perhaps Mitchell represents desires this change. this kind of watering down. And that's something the traditional Adventists don't. And just before you jump in there, don't forget what you're going to say. Just confirming what Rodrigo said there, which was a similar quote, but in 2015. It was, what was your quote again there, Rodrigo? It was from...
they also help us to overcome the human tendency to accept the Bible.
And it was but what was the actual statement called? It was
offering an inspired guide to the Bible passage without exhausting their meaning or preventing further study.
Yeah, and so they made a similar claim in 2015, and this one concerns me. Rather than replacing the Bible, awesome, they uplift Scripture and correct inaccurate interpretations that are derived from tradition, human reason, personal experience, and modern culture. That's more than a comforter. Comforting is part of it, but the traditional Adventist teaching wants to hold her up so high that the church in 2015 said that they're not replacing the Bible, but they're there to correct inaccurate interpretations. Now, that kind of language, I dare say, Mitchell wouldn't like, and the broader church doesn't like, but nevertheless, it is officially what the church stands for. And I think that is very dangerous, because who decides then what's an incorrect interpretation? Thoughts, Mitchell?
Yeah, absolutely. John the Baptist, when he heard that Jesus was doing ministry and even some of his disciples were going to follow Jesus instead, John the Baptist's disciples going to follow Jesus, what John the Baptist said there is very telling. He said, "He must increase, I must decrease." And that very much, I think, has to be the way that we see Ellen White. And I completely agree with you in the sense that, does Ellen White's writing correct inaccurate readings of Scripture that are from tradition, etc.? No. The Bible should correct. Like, the Bible is its own interpreter. We who come from the Protestant tradition have like we say, sola scriptura. The Bible and the Bible alone is what is needed to understand the Bible. Now, I understand, obviously, and I'm hoping to do further research next year about how we can use, say, history to better understand what the Bible would have meant to its first hearers. Like, obviously, there's a place to bring other things to the Bible, but the Bible is first and foremost able to correct if we are to read it with the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And I think this is the point. Like, Ellen White was able to correct some things back in her day, but she's not here now.
2015,
and we have yes, and I think you'll find that I actually tend to agree with you in this sense. I think we are putting too much stock in someone who died 100 years ago, rather than asking God to make the gift of prophecy more present and active in our church today.
Let's go to the next question. And this was good for me, Rodrigo. I worked out how to use the PowerPoint. Can't believe it. So question 2, is it possible for... Now, this is one I'm glad you're here, Rodrigo, because you can perhaps unpack it a little bit more before Mitchell answers. Is it possible for Christ's second coming to occur before the enactment of the Sunday law according to Adventist prophetic understanding? What were you saying there, Rodrigo?
Yeah, this question is a very simple question based on the main idea that Jesus said he's coming as a thief, right? Without any advice or any preamble or any spoiler. No dates, no times, no nothing. Of course, we have so many different eschatological or eschatologies understanding across the Protestant and including Catholics as well. But at the end of the day, any eschatological understanding will never surpass or pass the words of Jesus saying, hey, you guys have no idea the day I'm coming. People will be marrying, just living their lives, and I'm going to show up. However, in the SDA church, the church and the organization I was part of for 40 years until 2022, is a church that defends that something is going to happen before the second coming of Jesus. My question is, it is possible, based on the Bible alone, understand that Christ can come before the Sunday law?
So, Mitchell, what are your thoughts there? Again, what do you think the church teaches on this? Why won't pastors come on the show and answer it, or any public platform? And then what are your thoughts on this one personally?
Sure. So obviously church would say, no, it is not possible before the Sunday law. And they would suggest that to be the case because of their the reading of not only Revelation, but numerous types, antitypes throughout the Bible that seem to portray a conflict of worship being the central theme throughout the Bible. Cain versus Abel, conflict of worship. Elijah.
Here we'll be back in a moment. There we go. Back again.
Sorry. So as I said, Cain and Abel, conflict of worship. Elijah, conflict of worship. So there seems to be this view throughout the entire Bible of this conflict of worship, and that's what the Seventh-day Adventist Church bases it on. Plus, what Ellen White says in the Great Controversy about the Sunday laws. So the church, obviously, that's why they say it. As you've suggested, Rodrigo, about Jesus coming as a thief in the night, should there be nothing that we can get a sense of when he is coming? And I'm just going to quickly bring up Matthew 24 just to check something, just to make sure that I understand something correctly. Yeah, so Matthew 24:36, but about that day or hour no one knows, not even the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying, giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. And that's what you've mentioned. And it says in verse 42, therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you must also be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. I would suggest that the Sunday law, if this is how I would understand it personally, the Sunday, like in answer to your question and the meaning behind it, the Sunday law is meant to be one of those things that indicates, hey, maybe you should be ready. It doesn't indicate that it's going to happen immediately, if that makes sense. Now, obviously, you can look at like death decrees, and that's the point where the church says this like goes out, let he is holy be holy still, let he who's righteous be righteous still, etc. The church would then say that. I personally, because I have resolved to see things from the Bible and the perspective of the Bible, I see there is going to be a conflict of worship, not just at the end of time, but continuing all through human history. What is recorded in the Bible is an observation of the nature of the conflict between God and Satan. That's and yes, I know I'm using great controversy language and imagery that isn't necessarily biblical, but I see that there's a conflict of. Oh, am I still in?
Yes, sorry, I was just mine dropped.
I didn't drop. Oh,
no, you didn't drop.
Connection lost. Oh, thank goodness.
No,
I thought for a moment there that I dropped.
And why do you think Adventist pastors that are ordained would be cautious coming on?
To answer this question in particular, because I think for a great many of them it doesn't matter so much. I think
let's not use that as an excuse. Let's not use that as a reason, because the point
is,
okay, then why won't they come on? Because the system. Why won't the system allow them to come on?
Sure. I would suggest that the reason why is because, give me a second. Got this. So help. So you mean why would they not come onto your show in particular,
public,
or why would they
why would they have trouble if they desired to answer this and they would love to answer this? Why won't they answer this in public? Not necessarily my show.
I honestly don't know, because if they would have an answer, surely there'd be nothing to lose in answering the question. Either the organization values certainty, and the natural uncertainty of this kind of question makes people feel a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know. Or look, I couldn't say for certain. I can give you my best educated guess, and that is that I think that the question itself lends itself to a certain amount of uncertainty, but I don't know.
That's all right, and it's fine to not know. And maybe it is a question they could answer. We're not saying every single question they can't answer, but what are your thoughts, Rodrigo?
Here in Brazil, not here in Brazil, but in Brazil, where the people I'm trying to communicate with my project and so many other projects in Brazil as well. Brazilians are very traditional. Seventh-day Adventist Brazilians are very traditional, extreme traditional, conservative in terms of Ellen White, etc. And the two pastors, they answer me saying, Rodrigo, I cannot answer that because I will not be in the same line of the sola scriptura if I answer this question as I believe as a pastor, because I need to bring Ellen White as a hermeneutical key or hermeneutical lens over this answer, and that will demand for the person who is listening to me to have faith on her writings for me to go over and continue to talk about this specific answer. So I need my audience to have faith in Ellen White's interpretation or her view of the end times for me to proceed with this answer. Otherwise, if I go to a Baptist church, if I go to a Presbyterian church and answer this question, people are going to say, yes, of course, Jesus can come back anytime. If he wants to come back tomorrow, he can. However, in the SDA church, the members cannot answer like that because they believe not only in the Bible, but also in an additional or in an extra interpretation of the end time events. And that makes hard for me to answer that publicly.
Do you think that's possibly why Adventist pastors?
It makes absolute sense from a more conservative standpoint. A black and white view of who Ellen White is, a view that she has to be absolutely inerrant, which I will stress again is above even her view of the Bible. When we just a note on inerrancy versus infallibility. Inerrant means there is no error in it. Infallible means that even though there might be error in it, it is still there is still the Spirit of God working through it, and it is profitable for learning more about who God is. And we understand that, to quote Ellen White, the Bible writers were God's pen men, not his pens. They saw things and then used their own language to express it. So, and we see examples in the Bible of some seeming contradictions. And I say seeming contradictions, but I just straight up say contradictions. There are some contradictions in the Bible, but I have no problem with these things being there, because that represents the person in particular who is seeing that aspect of God. How is God active in their life, and how does he promise to be active in our lives too? Does that make sense?
What are your thoughts, Rodrigo?
Yeah, I think it makes sense, because when you talk there's a saying in Brazil that people say, in the Adventism, you can create your own Adventism. So you create a multiverse of Adventisms under the same roof.
Yeah.
And if you speak with the first row of the church, yes, they are conservative. They are dressed like conservative. They're just using the hymnal. But if you go back a little pews, then you can see people thinking out of the box. Hey, Ellen White is nice, but I never use Ellen White to interpret the Bible. But if you go back further in the church, you're going to say, hey, I don't care about Ellen White. I stick with the Bible. And I can filter whatever is coming from the pulpit. If it's from the red books, I push to the left. If from the Bible, I received. So you see, you can build many different Adventisms under the same roof. But for conservatives, it's tough to have this question because they do have to bring Ellen White to the top of the conversation.
It's interesting that I was speaking to an Adventist pastor the other day, and he said, I'd like to come on because I would answer all of these in alignment with the church. He was a more conservative pastor.
Yeah.
And so when we say pastors won't come on, it's more of these further back in the big tent pastors who would love to speak up to some of these things, but fear potential loss of job. We haven't said already yet, but that's there. And it's interesting that these front row Adventists, the traditional Adventists, look back at the rest of the progressive Adventists and say, please get out of our church. Whereas the others, and Larry Geraghty was on the show, and he's the architect, I believe, of current gospel Adventism. Larry Geraghty is the man. He was the guy that steered the whole, what is now the 28 Fundamentals Committee, wording it, everything. And he created a document there that progressive Adventists can kind of, work with. We can work with this watered down version. But he said on the show, Pete, these Adventists in the big tent that want us out, we want to include them too. We embrace and welcome them as well, which kind of highlights this issue, whereas the Mitchell kind of Adventist, the gospel Adventist, the Steve Beagles Adventist, they do want to include and accept everybody. But the reality is, I believe, and I'm interested in your thoughts, both of you, that the guys in the front row, the traditional Adventists that want you progressives gone, really have more doctrinal and source material and Ellen White material to bolster and support their kind of Adventism. What are your thoughts?
I think that's quite frankly because they're using Ellen White. They're reading her how they would like to read her. They're reading the gift of prophecy.
That's the irony, is I believe the progressives are doing that, and the traditional are not. Like traditionals are looking at her authority. It's black and white, very clear what she says, and they just speak that. But the progressives are the ones, are the tricky dicky ones going, oh, but it really means this. And if we look at that, it means that. And Ellen White's just being used. The White Estate banned this book.
Yeah, because look, I respect that we have a difference of opinion on this one, but I'm very much going to push back on it because I think in you holding this view, and I can understand.
For 500 interviews.
Yeah. How many seasons?
Yeah. So I've been doing this for, I just added 500 interviews.
Yeah, 500 interviews.
Finger on the pulse.
And not just that, like, you've been playing the barn night for decades.
30 years.
You've seen what the conservatives in the church are capable of. Because
But I was trying to change them. I was trying to say, you guys are misusing Ellen White. You're misinterpreting her. Ellen White would have said this. Ellen White would have supported me doing this. I was wrong for those decades. And what I've learned in the last 5 years and 500 plus interviews is that the core Ron Kelly, Ted Wilson Adventists actually are fighting for their birthright. And the progressive Adventists are deluded like I was. And I don't think I'm just grabbing at straws with that. I believe that we have created an Ellen White that works for us and connects with the Bible in ways that even she, when you look at the source material, when you read the Great Controversy as much as I have in the last 5 years, you realize the thrust of her message is not a progressive Adventist message.
Okay, well, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
you've read Reclaiming the Prophet. You've read More Than a Prophet. Was it biblically more accurate than the traditional view of Ellen White as a prophet?
Yes, and this is why I have trouble explaining my view. I lean way more to these guys, to the Ellen White that I was raised believing on campus at Avondale, from a toddler to an actual school teacher at Avondale. My Adventism was the watered down, deluded version of Adventism. Now, it is more accurate and closer to the Bible. So these guys, you guys, the progressive Adventists that don't like to be categorized, are closer to the Bible's understanding. But to try and make that work within the Adventist framework is impossible, because Ellen White, her teachings marinate into the Adventist church so deeply that it's at its core. It is the DNA of Adventism. So what I tried to do for 30 plus years in my ministry, 40 years actually, what these guys have done for 60, 70 years, what Des Ford tried to do, is bring in the gospel to the Adventist church. Jesus, atonement at the cross, rest on the Sabbath, not as salvific, but as a benefit to humans. We felt that we had a better version of Adventism. And guess what? We did. It is a better version of Adventism. But it is never going to gain a footing within Adventism. It is never going to do that. And so the progressive Adventist, therefore, I believe, is deluded, because they think it will. Just because they're right, that's not my point. My point is they are right, but the church is never going to accept them, ever. Just like Metallica would never accept a country music lead guitarist as their lead guitarist in the band. They will never do that. It's because their DNA is not that which the progressive hopes to bring into the church. And so it's a hard one for me to explain, because on the one hand, you and I are on the same page. The other hand, I believe that you guys are trying to find something that is a utopia that does not exist, never will exist, and therefore continues to create a divide within the church that creates mental health issues for young people, and they run into the door. They need a definition. They need the broad church leadership to say, yes, we are a broad church. We accept all of you, or we don't. Ted Wilson said we don't. So they left.
Okay, I get where you're coming from with that. But the attitude that I've had is they would have to... Okay, so how likely is a church going to be to refuse tithe money? If it was gained from legitimate sources, how likely would it be for the Seventh-day Adventist Church to refuse tithe?
Very unlikely.
It's impossible, because the church believes that tithes, if you don't tithe, you're robbing God. If you're robbing God, you're gonna go to heaven.
So I'm going to keep saying what I'm saying. I'm going to keep paying my tithe. I'm going to keep turning up to the church. And there's nothing that these people can do to tell me that I don't belong in this church.
See, I find that very interesting. And that is a real rub that every progressive I've interviewed says. Don't tell me that I can't be an Adventist. They get very upset with that. I'm not telling you that you can't be an Adventist. I'm just telling you that you will never bring your Adventism into to have the kind of footing it needs to benefit the young people. Your Adventism, be it as much as you want. Yeah, I've seen the 30 years of work in North New South Wales Conference that myself and a lot of other people brought in, gone. It's gone.
Yeah, gone now, but I'm still here, aren't I?
There's no effective footing gained that can grow. Because when they have this kind of thing, they don't shout it from the rooftops. You're one of 5 other people that has come on the show in 5 years and spoken this authentically. So the gospel Adventism you speak of is shy and retiring and meets only in little Sabbath school classrooms behind the scenes and chitter-chatters amongst themselves after church. And B, that that because you don't have that bold shouting, you have no network to build upon that has any kind of roots in the church. It is peripheral, marginal, suppressed, ostracized, and therefore young people who want to embrace this gospel Adventism that could be a great thing never get a chance, generation after generation after generation. So yeah, go for it. When all the progressives say, hey, don't tell me what my Adventism is, I can't be an Adventist. Sure, go for it. Continue being dysfunctional. Continue not offering to young people what they need. Go for it. Keep doing that.
But Peter, if I may say something here, like, I don't think the organization, the SDA organization, has any problem with people creating multiple versions of Adventism.
Right.
And the specific reason is exactly what Mitchell just said. I am the church. I am participating in the community. I'm returning my tithes, my offerings. I'm participating. So the Adventism version that Mitchell's believe, or in Mitchell's mind and vision, and his friend and families and community, actually, for the church, it's okay to exist because they control the main version of Adventism overall any other version that may exist in our brains. And this is it's like, it's like you're going to a place when you can paint, the painting classes, and you paint with your friends. Oh, let's go out, let's go for afternoon, let's just paint. You can paint whatever you want because the space is providing you the possibility to create your own art. So the Adventism today, to survive, because these first pew members, they will die one day, very soon, because they are very old generation, and the new generation will take over. So now the question for the Seventh-day Adventists, for the new generation, I'm talking about like people from the 18s, 14 years old now, Pathfinders. The question is, what kind of Seventh-day Adventist church will exist in 20 years? Is Ellen White will be something that's going to happen? People will believe that the Pope is the big villain of the church. People will believe that the Sunday law or the United States of America, they'll prosecute people and they search for people in the mountains. Are people still going through that? The new generation, the TikTok generation, the Instagram generation, these guys are really believing in this? Should we go to a different direction to keep existing as a church? And I think if I was the president of the Seventh-day Adventist today, which is a Brazilian guy as well, I would ask the same question. How can I survive this church in 20 years if people are not even coming to the service in Brazil, which we used to have 3 services a week, full of people? Yeah. Now they only have 1.
The church is dying.
Yeah.
The sad thing is the people that hold the gem of Adventism, the gospel progressive Adventists, they aren't answering these questions, having dialogue. They are not public or networked. They're not organized. They're not getting anything done. So what's happening is that there is a void, a vacuum that is being filled by young conservative Adventists. So I had to quell a laugh. I'm sorry, Stephen Beagles, but Stephen says, Peter, gospel Adventism is taking over the church. Now, Rochelle has got a bingo game that you can download of how many times I say certain things. If you're watching today, bingo, you're going to win from just this one alone. Stephen, these are the gospel Adventist leaders of the church. The Ellen White estate cancelled them. They are not taking over the church. The opposite is happening. This is the naivety of the progressive Adventist that claims to want to hang on to the church, but does nothing to promote it.
Peter, what does a victory look like?
A victory looks like leadership saying publicly, we support progressive Adventists and traditional Adventists, and we foster a diverse church that allows all of them to be welcomed here in existence. We support the conservative Toowoomba Church. We support the liberal church. But at the moment, leadership is the problem. Leadership is trying to not allow that statement to be made.
So your position is congressionalism?
Well, I think there needs to be a statement that all kinds of Adventists are accepted, so that people who say, hey, that's not my Adventist, Ted Wilson, that's not my Adventism, that the leadership says, and we welcome yours as well. But all I've experienced for 40 years, and these guys have experienced for 70 years, is a church that tries to shut them up.
So, if I may, I had heard in the nominating committee of the General Conference, when they were looking at either returning Ted Wilson or bringing in someone new, I had heard that there was a significant number of people there who believed that God could not finish the work unless Ted Wilson was president.
Amen. You're proving my point.
That's tough.
So you said, what does the church need to look like? And I said what it needs to look like. It doesn't look like that. In fact, I did a show with Rodrigo
it doesn't look like that now.
about Erton Cola that would make your blood curdle or freeze in your veins. It is not going to change. In fact, it's going to be more and more difficult for progressive Adventists to gain any kind of foothold.
Yeah,
I don't know what the answer is. I know what it looks like for a church to be accepting and have growth, to be a broad church. I know what that looks like. But progressives are doing nothing to make it happen. Nothing. That's what I feel let down about.
But Peter, and Mitchell, if you look online, I think 1 week or 2 weeks after Ayrton Keller was elected, if you go to the first or second sermon from Mark Feeling, he was preaching so the ladies can dress a little bit more conservative, with no use of the rings or collars or earpiece or something like that. Makeup. That was the preaching of Mark Feeling like 2 weeks after Ayrton Keller was elected.
Yeah.
So there's no hope in the front.
I don't know if Steve Beagles is doing this just to purposely get a reaction from me, but the cat is out of the bag. We know the message is getting out. It is not getting out. The AUC meetings here recently with women's ordination, the progressives have already decided they want women ordained. In this part of the world, 75% even of grassroots members want women to be ordained. The recent AUC, this is how successful you progressives are, okay? This is how great you guys are. I'm not speaking to you, Mitchell, speaking to these guys out here that are telling me that I'm criticizing them. I'm criticizing the fact that you don't realize the system is holding you down so vigorously, and you need to wake up to that fact that at the AUC recently, where, oh, Pete, you wait, they're going to be voting on women's ordination, this AUC. They're going to vote on it, and we might be just like the North American division where we get to ordain women. You're wrong. You wait and see. Next minute, even though they had 6 out of 9 conferences say, yep, let's vote on it, a couple of weeks beforehand, 2 of the conferences pull out. North New South Wales conference, yay, progressive conference was one of them. So then...
No, North New South Wales is not a progressive conference.
That's exactly right.
It was never progressive.
Hey, don't undo my 30 years of being involved with it being progressive. I agree with you. It wasn't progressive, and leadership was trying to shut us down every week. I agree with you on that one. But my point is, here we go at the AUC. They take the voting off the table. Next minute, they say it's going to be up for discussion. Uh-oh. Next minute, it's taken off even discussion. They then get wind, the leadership, that there's going to be a motion from the floor to have it discussed. So they get up and they remove the opportunity of people on the floor to even make a motion. So when I hear people saying the progressives are doing something and things are changing, I laugh. You guys are doing nothing. Nothing's changing. It's going backwards, in fact. And the progressive Adventists are going to find... Like, I love what you're doing, Mitchell. This is not a criticism of you. I want more of you. I want more of people like
No,
you
no,
doing
okay,
what you're doing.
No, I am not doing enough. Okay, I'm going to be brutally honest with you here, Peter. If I believe that God has called me to the spiritual gifts that he has called me to, then I have been quiet on social media because I have so desperately wanted a ministerial position more than anything. And I have deliberately muzzled myself so that I can make myself appear like someone who is employable. That is completely against what God has actually called me to in the spiritual gifts that I was told that I had before I even decided to do ministry, before I even got the confirmation of that call to go and study theology at Avondale College.
It's your spiritual calling.
More than anyone, I deserve the opprobrium for not calling out these things more openly. And having said that, I'll say the same thing that I've said in the past. If progressive Adventists were more active in mission, if they believe that progressive Adventism is the best expression of the gospel, then they should be more active in mission. If they were more active in mission, if progressive Adventists did pay their tithe, baptisms and tithe are the two numerical metrics that the church organization cares about.
100%. Okay, can I make a question, Mitchell? Yeah. If
yeah, absolutely. Sorry.
No,
you're not. I've been talking a lot.
My question to you is this: imagine a Seventh-day Adventist church led by gospel Adventists. Can you express how this church would look like for us? Like, we participate in the Seventh-day Adventist, we know the service, how it looks like, the sequence, the politics inside the church, etc., and of course the quality of the pulpit. So can you illustrate for us how a gospel Seventh-day Adventist will look like in 2025 if you have the key and the building in your hands?
Okay, so I do actually like Ellen White for her devotional merit. So I will quote Ellen White here: "Savior mingled with people as one who desired their good, met their needs, then bade them come follow me." I think we as a church need to be more attentive to the needs of our community. And I don't just mean running the right evangelistic programs, all of that sort of stuff, like saying the right things. We need to be self-sacrificial to an extent that we really aren't now. Most churches I've been at West in Australia are at the very least it's not publicized. And obviously Jesus says, "Let not your left hand know what your right is doing," but that means that it's not happening. We should be serving our communities more and more, and doing so in numbers, because if we're doing things for the numbers, then that's essentially a gospel of work. I need to do this so that God's work can go forward. No, God can do the work with or without you. The reason why God asks us to do things is so that he can draw us closer to him. Service, like outreach, is as well as, like so many parts of the church, I have a relationship with God because of the work that he has called me to do. And I think to a certain extent, this needs to be true of our church as well. A gospel Adventist church is a church that serves, is a church that cares about its local community, is a church that is willing to get off its butt and do something. Because I'm afraid to say, I haven't seen so professional, progressive
Looks like Mitchell.
That's my thoughts on
that. You froze a little bit there, but well said. And I'm glad that you're using this platform as a chance to get what you need to say out there. It's great. Now we're going to keep moving on with the questions because we've only answered 2. Stephen Beagle says the subject is the gospel, not women's ordination. About my
you may
rant
need to
earlier.
say that again because it's not coming through clearly on my end.
Oh, okay. I think it might be just your end because I'm pretty sure it's going out clearly. But yeah, so we're going to go on with more questions. But Steve Beagle says the subject is the gospel, not women's ordination. My point was, Stephen, that you had said progressives are gaining ground. I gave you an example of progressives who 75% would like to see women ordained, of how they cannot even gain ground with that when they promise they are. Progressive Adventists talk up and offer false hope with no action.
Sorry, I only caught that last part. Progressives offer up talk and false hope with no action. I didn't catch the rest of it.
Yeah, no, everyone else can hear me. It's just you. So
because I'm going off my phone.
So yeah, sorry about that. But I was just responding to Steve Beagles.
No, that's
Steve
my
Beagles
fault.
was saying that the gospel Adventists are making lots of ground, and I'm saying that my talk about women's ordination, he was saying that's not the gospel, that's women's ordination. And I'm saying, yes, but progressives, 75% believe in women's ordination, want it enacted, and yet they can do nothing about it. They're hardly gaining ground. Let's go on to the next question. And as I said, Rodrigo, is that, what's going on here? Question 2. That was a couple of things you added there, Rodrigo, about that Ellen White says the Sabbath will be the great test of loyalty, for it is the point of truth, especially controverted. When the final test shall be brought to bear upon men, then the line of distinction will be drawn between those who serve God and those who serve him not. And that's a good reason why Adventist pastors will not answer that question, because even though a Protestant would say, yes, of course, Christ can return at any time, even before the Sunday law. They're dying to say that, the progressive Adventists, but they can't say it publicly if they're employed by the church as a pastor, because Ellen White clearly says that that's not to be the case. Whereas in Acts we read, he said that to them, it is not for you to know the times or dates the Father has set by his own authority. So question 3, and again, Mitchell, we'll hand this to you. What does the church believe? Sure. Why do you think pastors are wary of answering this publicly, not just on my platform, anywhere publicly? And what do you personally believe, if you want to share? When Jesus returns in glory with his angels in the clouds, will everyone... Sorry, are you... is it? Have you got Wi-Fi you can tap into?
Give me a second.
I think let's see.
Okay.
Is that a bit better for you?
Yeah, it seems to be at the moment. Yeah, I've just moved back to the Wi-Fi because that's actually working now.
Oh, good. So question 3, when Jesus returns in glory with his angels in the clouds, will everyone who is still alive on earth at that time be someone who rejected the Sunday law?
Actually, I'd like to go to Rodrigo for some clarification on this question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a missing part of this question, but the whole question is when Jesus returns. So let's imagine Jesus in the sky, the angels, finally the day come, and we have people rejoicing. So everybody who looks up and receives Jesus in the cloud say, hey, this is our Savior, the one who is expecting. Every single saved person alive receiving Jesus in the clouds will be a person who rejected the Sunday law. The saves, the people saved receiving Jesus alive and seeing Jesus coming in the clouds alive and looking up, all of them saved will be everybody will be people who actually rejected the Sunday law. Yes, or
is it the ones who aren't taken to heaven?
The ones who will
Everyone
be
who's left.
taken to heaven, the saved.
I mean, the church would say, if one isn't going to heaven with God, then yes, by necessity, one would have rejected the Sunday law. I would suggest that, honestly, this is a new question to me. It's completely out of left field for me. I don't entirely know how to, I don't entirely know what the question is driving at.
So the question is, imagine like all the people, the living, that are saved,
yep,
and receiving Christ in his second coming. People that they're alive and saved, are these people, are those people, the ones, all of them, the ones who rejected the Sunday law?
I guess you're saying is, how important is this Sunday law in a
Exactly.
defining moment for Adventists?
In the defining, yeah.
Those who have gone to heaven, are they all the ones that rejected the Sunday law and kept the Sabbath? And all those who stay on earth are the ones who embraced the Sunday law?
Among the living.
Yeah, okay. So obviously the church would say, yeah, those in heaven accepted, they got the seal of God, and those on earth got the mark of the beast. That's what the church would say. And yeah, I couldn't tell you why a pastor wouldn't immediately answer it that way. I don't necessarily see what could be the issue with it. I know I did briefly look through the presentation on this from 9 months ago, but I can't remember the implication that came out of it.
Could it be that the Sunday law is so important to Adventists that if you try and deny this question as being true, that you are putting the Sunday law's importance a little bit further down the back of the bus?
Yeah, and another way to question this is, for example, another different way to question this is, let's imagine like Jesus, the second coming of Jesus will happen one day of the week, right? Doesn't matter, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, any day. Jesus is coming one of the days of the week. So let's pretend that Jesus is coming on Wednesday, right? Let's say Wednesday is the Jesus that finally came. So now Jesus is on Wednesday, bringing his people and saving and everybody who's receiving him. Among the saved people will be people who attended a Sunday service on the Sunday before Wednesday in their Sunday churches. Would they be among the living, receiving Jesus as their Savior?
I honestly think that's a really difficult question to answer, because as much as Ellen White writes stuff in The Great Controversy, I think it's practically impossible to know exactly what the time frame is going to be, what the situation's going to be.
Pretty clear about the Sunday law is everything, and
yes.
keeping the Sabbath. Jane has asked a question that might make it clearer. Mitch, do you believe you must be a Sabbath keeper to be saved? And I guess
no, I don't.
At that time,
I don't personally believe. So right now, no, you don't have to be a Sabbath keeper to be saved. But at the same time, I've got no idea what things look like, because my personal view of the Sunday law and all of that is like that's what they called it back in the late 19th century, the late 1800s. I think there's definitely going to be a question on worship, but exactly the nature of that question of worship, I don't actually know. Ellen White says the Sunday law. It could be a Sunday law. I don't know. But there's nothing in the Bible to indicate specifically that it is Sunday, although there are more traditional Adventists who would
I would agree with you on that, but this is one of those things you said, why would traditional Adventists have a problem with me? This is one of those reasons. They would not agree with you saying the Sabbath is not salvific.
Because you don't have to. They're jolly well wrong, aren't they? If you confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved.
And this is progressive Adventism in motion. And I wish more of you would speak up, because it's not traditional Adventism. Schley just said, you just rejected Ellen, Mitchell.
Cool, if that's how you see it.
But I believe that Mitchell is rejecting Ellen White in some areas, or giving her room to be wrong in some areas, and uplifting her writings when her writings is aligned. They're aligned with the Bible. I don't know if I'm wrong with this.
That's correct. I mean, and to give a little bit of perspective on my view of what the gift of prophecy is, I also think that C.S. Lewis had the gift of prophecy. It's just the Anglicans didn't make a big deal out of it.
and
he's still...
You're lucky you're not an ordained pastor. You'd be fired this week.
Sure. But it'll be interesting to see if my principal gets any interesting calls.
I know. I hope I haven't put you into the firing line. Now,
look, I did that myself.
Well, and you know, we're highlighting you are allowed to have some personal views. What clearly comes across is that you are an Adventist and you are willing to support the, not putting this in a derogatory way, but the party line until such time as you can influence them to see it a different way, or until such time that you think, okay, well, that's just what they decide. But I have my pocket of progressive Adventism here. And I'm just saying that the progressive Adventists are very ineffective at the moment, and that's sad.
Your characterization of me is pretty damning, and it's entirely deserved. My little pocket of Adventism that I can be happy with. No, if I genuinely think that my Adventism is the better Adventism, why aren't I getting out there and saying it?
Amen.
Yeah, it's a good question.
And why aren't the other pastors? Okay, yeah, we're going on to the next.
I can't speak for them.
No, but I can. Because they tell me behind the scenes. Our hands are tied. An exact quote from last weekend.
Well, can your hands not be tied, people?
I think that you should. That what you're saying is great. Your hands shouldn't be tied.
Like if, like this is like atheists, for example. Atheists will say, "I don't respect Christians who don't tell absolutely everyone." Because, and they use the example of hell, if you believe that people are going to be tortured eternally because they don't follow God, why would you not want everyone to follow God? Why would you not be as open about that as possible? And this is a rebuke for myself first and foremost. If I think that that the view of Ellen White that has elevated her above the Bible is bad, why would I not be more obvious about that? If I have seen, and I have seen, people who are close to me lose their connection with the Adventist church because they can't square the circle on Ellen White, I've had the answers to that. They haven't. I'm responsible in some respect. I'm responsible for that.
I chatted with, I cannot mention his name. He was a high-level GC global Adventist leader that watched the show every week until about 3 years ago. Maybe he still does lurk there. And I invited him on the show. He said, I can't. He said yes. And then he realized what he had said and said, actually, I can't. He's still employed. He would lose his job, he said, but he wants to have an influence. And he said he wanted to meet up with me for lunch, which we did. And he showed me a document this thick of A4 sheets of paper of his plan to network with all the progressive Adventists in the world that he'd come to know over his 30 plus years working at high level leadership, where he was going to network, draw them together, and provide a way for them to connect and gain a foothold in the church politically. I was excited. I've written to him many times in the last 3 years. How's it going? Because I did say at the time, good luck with that. It's not going to work. But I was excited still. But it looks like in the silence of his answers that if someone like him can't even bring it about, what hope do the rest of us have?
Of course he can't bring it about. He's a member of the institution.
Yeah, but he was going to try and build up a separate network, like conferences, unions, separate. He showed me the names of people he'd spoken to, and very impressive. and maybe it's happening and I'm about to be surprised, but all I hear is butterfly wings.
God isn't in the institution because God isn't in any institution. God is in the hearts of the individuals who have faith in him.
Not if that institution claims a special message for these last days.
The institution will look. I'm going to speak as candidly as I can, as I can find the words to do so here. But the Seventh-day Adventist Church isn't going to heaven. There will be no general conference of the Seventh-day Adventists in heaven.
But they claim a special message that is to be taught to the world that will impact the salvation of those who listen or don't.
Sure, and God will take that message to the world with or without the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
We're saying that very message has got warts on it.
Okay, well, if I may,
not the progressive message, the traditional Adventist message.
Sure, but when I was out doing ministry in a rural area, I had the privilege to get to know an older couple who did evangelism in America, both North and South America. And they said that apparently they got to know the Pentecostals really well, and the Pentecostal minister was now keeping Sabbath and the health message, and was encouraging his church members to do the same. And if this is a message that is from God, it's not only going to be confined to us. And if it's a message that God thinks people need to hear, then people will hear it regardless of who's
you think this message, where after probation and before the return of Christ, that a people must stand sinless because to vindicate God and prove Satan's claim that it can't be done wrong.
That's Andreas.
Is the important? No, it's Adventism. It's Ellen White.
It's M.L. Andreasen taking parts from the Great Controversy. The Great Controversy.
Go and read the Great. How many?
No, I've read the Great Controversy.
How many times?
Once or twice. Probably once all the way through. And I make reference to it every so often.
You're not going to understand it if you read it once. It's a book to study. And when you study it, you will find the gist of what she's saying is a people will be raised up. And they must be raised up, because the whole point of Adventism is to raise up a people who are ready to prove Satan's claim wrong. The probation closes for everybody. They stand without an intercessor. And in that time, they prove to all the planets and all the angels that it can be done. They can keep the commandments. They must have the propensity to fail, or otherwise they're not proving Satan wrong at that time.
Is the last generation theology official Adventist teaching in the 28 Fundamentals?
The 28 Fundamentals was crafted and written by Larry Geraghty.
Yes,
who is a progressive Adventist who has watered down Adventist teaching. M.L. Andreasen was capturing the sail, the wind in the sail, the direction of actual Adventism. He grasped that QOD, Questions on Doctrine, was trying to shift that perspective and let the rest of the world think Adventism was a normal evangelical kind of Protestant movement. He was a hero for the Adventist traditional movement, because he literally was highlighting the fact that the church was shifting away from its roots, its special message. It was watering down that special message.
Sure.
It's just there in black and white in Ellen White's Great Controversy. It even permeates Desire of Ages and Steps to Christ. It is all there. A people are being raised up when probation is closed to stand sinless, to vindicate God and prove Satan's claim wrong. This is the righteous. Let the righteous be righteous still, and the unrighteous, unrighteous. But at that point, unless the righteous, the last team, they've been given the seal, but they're not sealed until that final game. This team, this special people, this remnant, flies into a few weeks in the time of trouble, after close of probation, before Christ's return, and they play one last game. They must win that game to vindicate God. They must also have the possibility of failure, or they have not vindicated God.
Yeah, can I say something? What was when I looked at the Seventh-day Adventist church after I left the church? When I looked at church right now, I asked myself, what is the big promise of the church? What is the big promise of the church? And then I looked at the Christianity and what Jesus was promising to us, and I compare both sides, and I have trouble to put both sides together. So the big promise of Jesus is salvation, right? Salvation in Him. When I look to the Seventh-day Adventist church today, I'm not talking about the gospel Adventist, I'm talking about the church, the institution. I see our big promise to you is because we know the end of the movie. And we want to share with you how the movie is going to end. We're going to give you the spoiler. If you join us, you're going to know what no one else knows, what no other church is preaching. We have something here that will facilitate your process, your life through the end time events that we believe we are living now. And the whole promise of Jesus is going actually to the second, third, fourth place when I look to the Seventh-day Adventist movement. And that troubles me a lot because if you look to a Christian church, the main promise should be salvation in Jesus. Doesn't matter what you're preaching, eschatology, your prophet, whatever, come here, learn about Jesus, you're saved. Now you're saved. Let's go to another study to talk about prophecies. Now let's go to another study to talk about health. Let's talk about our prophet. Now you're safe in Jesus Christ. Amen. If you die now, you're safe in Jesus Christ. The problem I see today with the Adventists is they don't want to let this end of the spoiler of the world movie answer behind and just focus in Christ.
Yeah, on the now.
On now.
Not after probation closes in the future that you're getting ready for. Exactly. A time that is not even biblical.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be alive in the next 5 minutes. I need Jesus now. So the trouble I have with, I know a lot of Seventh-day Adventists, they say, man, if they turn to Jesus first, I will be back to the Seventh-day Adventist church tomorrow. Because I like the community, I like the people, I like the service. I don't care to go to the church. Yes, I like the Sabbath. I do like the Sabbath.
There are so many that would return to a progressive, gospel-centered Adventism.
Let's bring Jesus to the center.
And a lot of progressives say that, but they do nothing about it. Now, one thing I just want to address, Stephen Beagles has said, Peter has it in his mind the gospel cannot happen within Adventism. That is 100% not what I'm saying. Have never said it. And Stephen, you have said it many times. I keep saying that is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it cannot grasp a foothold in the Adventist church that gives it an effective nature that transforms lives. It will not grasp particularly because none of you are doing anything about it, but it cannot grasp a foothold that is big enough or significant enough to have influence. That's what I'm saying. I know that you understand the gospel. Mitchell understands the gospel. I'm not saying you cannot find the gospel within Adventism. I'm just saying that it will never gain a foothold of influence that will shift the tide. And as Rodrigo said there, encourage people to come back and grow in abundance and change people's lives for the better in the moment. Let's get on to the next question, which I think is number 4.
It is 2:00 already.
You got 3 minutes.
Yeah, okay. Let's. I'm just going to send a message to the guy and tell him I'll be a little bit late.
We're going to do, what do they call that final round, the fast round? What is that? Let's do it quick. We will.
I'm terrible.
We'll go quick on this one. So number 4, what happens to the prayers offered by those who are still living on earth after their cases have already been decided in the investigative judgment, whether for salvation or condemnation?
Well, that's the close of probation. So obviously, the church would suggest those prayers wouldn't be answered. my personal opinion on that is that if it's a matter of worship, then those people would have chosen against God, and they essentially wouldn't be praying to God.
And why do you think pastors may not want to?
But I think the question is during the investigative judgment. If you push the next slide, Peter, there's a word from Ellen White saying that during the investigative, not before the close of the probation.
Yeah, great question. Honestly, I have no idea, because it's impossible to know when someone's name has come up in judgment, or even if our idea of judgment is more from a Western perspective, like, forensically going through all of that sort of stuff. I have personally, sure, if you want to look at it from like the traditional Adventist, they don't have an answer to that question. They straight up can't answer the question. Has my name already been decided in the book? But I guess the other thing is too, in my experience, I have seen God answer prayers in situations where it is not his will that something happen. My father's second marriage, God still smoothed the way despite the fact that was not a good marriage. I think God loves us too much to abandon us entirely. There will come a point at which God's spirit is withdrawn from the world, and that would be like the hardening of Pharaoh's heart, where he's made that decision so often that decision is second nature to him. He positions himself as an enemy of God. But even if someone has come up for condemnation, I fail to see that God would not at least in some way be involved in their lives. And if someone is earnestly seeking God, then I would suggest then their names come up as being saved anyway. The sort of person who would earnestly pray to God, who God would listen to, would end up saved. That's as far as I can say it.
Okay, on to the next one. And Hebrews there clarifies, therefore he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede.
And that comes to what happens after the close of probation. What is that? Yeah.
And there's two probations, really. That's when it's closed for everybody and when it's closed for individuals.
At death.
And, three then, and when it's closed for individuals. So just before it's closed for everybody, not everybody's probation will be closed. Next day, all probation closes. And that's when the intercession is removed. And that's when those who are righteous remain righteous, and those who aren't remain unrighteous, and those that are righteous are given the seal. Christ presents them to God. God says, no worries. Yep, you've got the seal. One last test, guys. You must stand now without Jesus as an intercessor. And this verse proves Ellen's claim there that she says in black and white, proves the claim wrong. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Always. So it's blasphemy to say he doesn't. And she says in black and white that there will be a time when he doesn't.
Sure. But it occurs to me that we seem to have experiences with vastly different forms of Adventism, because it was
No, I understand your Adventism. I love it.
No, but
I grasp it.
I've not even looked at all of this sort of stuff.
Well, you've read The Great Controversy once.
Yeah, once.
So you need to read it more than once to grasp what M.L. Andreessen was saying.
Sure, but
if you want to find out true Adventism, you need to immerse yourself in the actual documents.
What I'm saying is this never came up in my baptismal studies.
It's definitely in the baptismal studies quite clearly about
the authority of Ellen White.
But it's you would have signed that Ellen White's authority is you're signing up for that.
Look up.
Go and find it. Let's do another show on that. We won't do that now. That'll be another show.
Yeah, well,
Stephen says he's been watching my show for many years, and I consistently say that. And I've written back, for the record, Stephen, there are Adventists who understand the gospel. When have I not said that? Never. I say their influence is minimal.
Yeah,
and will never have significance.
Yeah, I'm looking at the baptismal vows right now, and nowhere does it specifically name drop Ellen White.
Yeah, this is the watered down version. Then your generation has lived through the. Yeah, but I can show you from 1949. I read a 1949 one that my grandma herself signed on behalf of someone, and you will be shocked. You wouldn't sign it. So I'm saying you don't understand traditional Adventism because you've been given the watered down version. You had people like me singing at your church, focusing on Jesus. You had people like, Graham Frauenfelder and Glenn Roberts and all of these guys that were trying to keep you away from that. We did a great job. And so did these guys. These guys gave you a great understanding of Ellen White. I'm suggesting you don't have an understanding of what traditional Adventism is, and thank God for that.
Sure, I'll accept that.
So number 5, how can Seventh-day Adventists know if they have received the golden cards, designating them as part of the 144,000, and when would these golden cards be officially distributed?
The golden okay, so I had a bit of a read of I read the context, like this PowerPoint from the last slide, from the last presentation. And as far as I can tell, the golden cards is a metaphor for salvation, in which case it's received at Romans 10:9. And the 144,000, I don't know whether I don't know enough about Ellen White to know if she believed in a literal 144,000. It's never been our church, I don't know if it's never been our church's position, but it's not our church's position at this point that 144,000 is a literal number.
I think over the next text, Peter, I believe it's the reference from... Yeah, and you were right, Mitchell. Since 1947, 46, the Seventh-day Adventist Church dropped the belief that it was a literal number, and now it's a symbolic number. Yeah.
Well, thank goodness. Yeah. In which case, I would suggest that she's probably talking within the context of her understanding at the time. Prophets don't have to be 100% correct. I mean, I maintain that Job didn't believe in the resurrection. David certainly didn't seem to believe in the it's David specifically, because David talks about his son who died, the son from Bathsheba who died, and David says, "I will go down to him, but he will not come up to me." Like, to me, that indicates that David didn't actually believe there was going to be a resurrection of the dead. So I feel confident in saying that David was theologically wrong in that sense, but
that may align with the parable of the Lazarus and the rich, right?
Okay. Yeah. So
with the historical background of that same parable, as the Seventh-day Adventists believe it's a parable or is a cultural, background history.
Yeah, and I've always understood it to be cultural background as a story that was told specifically by the Pharisees, which Jesus then used without necessarily endorsing. And I personally would interpret Ellen White's statement here as a what's the word for it? As a poetic device rather than a
metaphor.
Yeah, a metaphor rather than a literal statement of theological fact.
Mm-hmm. Let's go on to the next one, but a quick review of the vows: belief in the gift of prophecy. That's Ellen White.
But it doesn't actually say Ellen White. It says that.
It's like we all know that the spirit of prophecy is the gift, the commandment-keeping people, and the spirit of prophecy. The spirit of prophecy is Ellen White. I'm saying that you would have to have known that. That it is a mark of the remnant church, and you also have to accept the remnant church acceptance of the Seventh-day Adventist Church as the remnant church of Bible prophecy.
Yeah. Okay. If I were to say anything on this, I feel like we'd be retreading old ground. I would suggest that the gift of prophecy is more than Ellen White, and I have, as a result of that, I've always lived my, I've always, understood my theology to be that the spirit of prophecy, like the testimony of Jesus, is the spirit of prophecy. Yes, I know, not traditional Adventist teaching, whatever.
Mitchell, can I ask you something?
Yeah, sure.
Do you believe the SDA Church is open for a new prophet?
No, I don't believe the SDA Church is open for a new prophet, and I'll tell you why. Because some years ago, I was looking for a spiritual gifts inventory to give to some of my youth. I did the GC Youth Spiritual Gifts Inventory, and it didn't even return the gift of prophecy as a possible gift that one could have. That has changed now. They have actually put that on there, but that was the case back in the past, that the GC Youth Department didn't even have the gift of prophecy as a possible thing you could return in a spiritual gifts inventory. I think that's quite telling. I think that's quite damning. I do not think at this point that the Adventist Church would be open to someone who claimed to have the gift of prophecy. And another reason I'll tell you why is because prophecy in the Old Testament was speaking truth to power. I mean, yes, there was messianic elements to it, but most of the time, you look at most of those prophets, and they were calling out things that the church was, that Israel was doing wrong, God's people Israel was doing wrong, and they were calling them back to repentance and faithfulness. Now, and you look at what happened to the prophets who did that; they were pilloried for it, and it's not just a matter of would the Adventist Church accept a prophet. It's a matter of if someone were to speak prophetically in the Adventist Church, they would be treated the exact same way as the prophets of old were, maybe without being executed.
Yeah. Do you believe the SDA Church would recognize another prophet or another person with the spirit of prophet outside of the SDA organization in a different church, recognizing that person receiving the spirit of prophecy?
I don't think the church would. The church institution organization, I don't think they would. And also, I don't think the church should. I think our fixation on Ellen White has, and yes, I know traditional Adventism would disagree with me, but I think our church's fixation on Ellen White is unhealthy for an understanding of the spiritual gifts as they are written in the Bible.
And that's the reason why an Adventist pastor ordained would not answer that question. And we'll go to the next one. We're nearly finished. We're doing really well. And I'll leave some of the comments.
Still isn't, according to official Adventist teaching, the sanctuary is not cleansed. The Day of Atonement is happening at the moment.
Yeah, which I would disagree with. So say that again. So based on Daniel 8:14 and Adventist interpretation, when was the sanctuary completely and once and for all cleansed?
The Adventist Church, in my understanding, would argue that it has not yet been completely and once and for all cleansed because they are going through the Day of Atonement process now.
And what do you think Adventist pastors would struggle answering that publicly?
I think they would struggle answering it because there's no way to. Well, there probably is a way to say it, but I don't think many would quite know how to express it in a way that that expresses the finality of the act of salvation.
Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts? Okay, so Day of Atonement happened once a year. The daily sacrifices for the for the forgiveness of for the sins of the people collectively, and the individual sin offerings that were brought by the people individually. These things happened every day. I think there's a case to be made, like if we're to take these types, antitypes, Jesus, like the people of Israel were saved, were considered righteous before God at the offering of the sacrifices, if that makes sense. They didn't have to wait until that day of atonement in order to be considered clean, in order to be considered right with God. Does that make sense?
Rodrigo?
Kind
I kind of feel, drawing parallels to pre-Christ on the cross, like even if Christ kept the Sabbath, for example, prior to the cross, post the cross, he wouldn't have, because that's when the salvific nature of, he would have kept it culturally, but not as salvation. Prior to his death, the law was important in getting you to heaven. Post his death, we have the new covenant. The whole point of the new covenant is that now your sins have been saved. If you're a believer, you're in, and you no longer keep the sacrifices, the legalities. You keep them. Not like Stephen says, I encourage people to do away with it. I'm not saying doing away with the law. You still keep it, but it is no longer salvific, and that's a big difference. And that's the point of the cross.
I really need to clear out now, if that's all right.
We will let you go. Really appreciate it, Mitchell, and thanks so much.
Let's do the final question. You guys can.
We'll just quickly hit the 7. I think you'll be able to answer it quickly.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you coming on the show. I know you've got to go. And where is number 7 there? Here we go.
Great question. I have no idea. That I had a look at these last night. I had a look at that one. I'm like, great question. I have no idea. I need to do more research into it.
Again, really appreciate you coming on the show, Mitchell. This kind of conversation is what moves it forward, is what actually creates a great place for progressive Adventists. So thanks, mate. Everyone give him a clap. Put some thumbs up.
I don't deserve it.
You do. Honestly, you do, because you're having the conversation. None of us is claiming to have answers. We're just trying to talk about it. And you've created a dialogue here. And I think potentially, I know I have another Adventist pastor coming on next week. So when they saw you, they were like, yeah, I think I can do it too.
Oh, God be praised that that's the case then. And I hope that he feels bold to do stuff. A lot of the stuff that I've said, I've known I can say because I'm not going to get a job as a minister. It's been 10 years since I graduated. That's just straight up not happening. I don't know why.
Maybe you should start your own Gospel Adventist church.
Join up with Stephen Beagles.
It is something I have considered. It is something I have considered. We have 3 churches in Toowoomba for a population of 150,000.
Nice.
Look, we'll see how we go. All right. I'm making no promises. If God leads me to do something, then I will follow him in that. But yeah.
Lots of people saying thank you. Jane, listening ear, 2 cracked eggs, listening ear again. Yep. Awesome, mate. We'll see you next time. And thanks again. I hope we haven't unsettled you too much at all.
Oh, no, not at all. I love coming on these things.
Yeah, it's great. I love catching up with you, mate. And until we do next time, let me know when you're down this way.
I will do. I'll be down at the end of the year.
All right, guys. See you.
Awesome.
Catch you all soon. Good to meet you. Rodrigo.
And Rodrigo, stick around. We'll just look at the last one together. See you, mate. Now, I felt that was really brave of Mitchell to come on the program. We had intended more of a look at the 7 questions where he just would share what the church would believe officially, why pastors may not come on. I had said that we wouldn't really go into the grilling of his opinion of it. And so, hopefully I didn't cross that line too much, but I really want to encourage the progressive Adventists, if anything, and those watching, go and have a look at Gospel Adventist. Steve Beagles, can you put in the comments please put in the comments link that we can send. Just send me one link that people can go and get in touch with your stuff. I want to encourage the Gospel Adventists to speak up. I would encourage these guys to give it another crack, find a different publisher, get it out there. I'll help promote it. I don't believe it, but it's way closer to the Bible than Ellen White's version.
I can help translate in Portuguese too, make available in Portuguese too.
Yes.
To Brazil. I think it would be great for people to have access to this material. Yeah, if they are interested, I'm happy to help.
That would be great. Well, let's look at this last one and just have a little bit of a thought. I think there's some follow-up things that come along with this one. So I'll bring it to that page straight away, and then there's a final page which I think looks at the Bible verses there. So we'll do those two frames, and then we will thank everyone for watching and leave you all to either sleep or go about your afternoon wherever you are in the world, or if you're in the UK, you're just waking up.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do, if Mitchell's watching again later, I do want to thank him for coming on the program, and it kind of reveals the situation of where they truly love the Adventist church, as did I. And the version that we were kind of sold, which I helped to sell for 30 years, truly believing that, the guys that were offering me the false hope, I truly believed that things were changing. And when I left, they were like, how, you're leaving. How can you bring about change if you've left? Well, here we are stimulating conversation. I think it's important. And I encourage people like Mitchell to really, stay in the Adventist church. People like Gospel Adventists stay in the Adventist church. And for the record, yes, there are people in the Adventist church that understand the gospel, in spite of Ellen White and her teachings, in spite of leadership suppression, ostracization, etc. And I'm just saying they don't have a very big influence. And this kind of message needs to have an influence. Otherwise, young people are going to be continually falling into the potholes of the legalistic Adventism. Steve Beagle says, it's the gospel Adventism versus legal Adventism. Well, gospel Adventism 2, legal Adventism 110 on the scoreboard. So, and it looks like it's never going to change that ratio. So that's what I'm saying, Stephen. So here's question 7, and then we'll get your thoughts on this, and then we'll head off. According to Leviticus, both goats used in the Day of Atonement ceremony had to be perfect and without blemish, like all sacrificial animals. Since this physical perfection symbolized the Messiah's sinlessness and purity, how can Adventists interpret the Azazel goat as representing Satan, who embodies sin and evil, rather than having both perfect goats represent Jesus Christ, the sinful Savior? I had someone on the show the other day that was an Adventist apologist, and I remembered you saying this question, and I said to them, how can Satan be the scapegoat? This person was saying he was, when in the Bible, in the process of placing, in the ceremony, placing the sins of man onto the sacrificial lamb, it had to be a sinless sacrificial animal without blemish. How can you place it on Satan? And I said, are you saying that Satan was actually sinless and blameless at that time?
Yeah.
Whoa, couldn't answer it. Sometimes they
Yeah.
don't come on the show because they can't answer the questions.
Yeah. And these thoughts, they always existed, Peter, but the people were repressed or silenced to think and bring these questions out in the Sabbath school morning or in the youth program or in the conversations in the corridors of the churches. The people will say, oh, brother, careful, you may be being not too close to the Holy Spirit. Maybe your thoughts are going to the tree. You're listening to the serpent. And these type of comments make people say, yeah, maybe I'm questioning too much. Maybe I'm making too many questions. I should not do it. I have to trust. I have to trust in the message of the church. So these questions are not new, but the generation who are making these questions are definitely new.
Yeah. And Steve Beagles writes, Satan and Jesus were both perfect in heaven prior to the rebellion. Well, I'm pretty sure Adventists say that Satan will be the scapegoat. I don't think it's a scapegoat right now. And even if it was right now, it would be at the time of the cross. Are we saying that Satan was blemish free at that point? Are we saying he's blemish free in the future? No. So so what if they were perfect in the past? It makes no point at all for now. Yeah. And Ellen wrote, it was seen also that while the sin offering pointed to Christ as a sacrifice and the high priest represented Christ as a mediator, the scapegoat typified Satan, the author of sin. upon whom the sins of the truly penitent will finally be placed. That's pretty clear she's saying that, and that is absolutely, totally contradicting the whole sanctuary process, where it was placed on a perfect sacrificial animal. It is totally opposite to that.
Yes, yes. And I was talking with a pastor 2 weeks ago, and I say, hey, did you notice that the Seventh-day Adventist Church is the only church in the entire planet that ripped the veil twice?
Yes. Yeah.
Because Jesus, when he died, the veil was ripped apart, and then the Seventh-day Adventist in 1844 they ripped again. So Jesus.
Oh, I wish Mitchell was here to answer that. Now Donna DB is writing a lot in the comments. Donna, are you a Seventh-day Adventist? Donna, come on and answer these questions. You mentioned that we're criticizing the church, that at the second coming, will we be huddled together still criticizing Jesus? You've said some here are showing their true spirit. Just study, folks. I'm saying, Donna, come on the show and let's study together. Let's go over these 7 questions together. You can answer them, and I've got a suspicion that you probably will answer these questions in light of how Ellen taught them. And good on you. But be bold. Don't take little shots from the sidelines. Come on. Shoot me a message, Donna, and let's make it happen. And don't forget, Stephen, I need your link so I can give you a bit of a plug. And of course, the Bible preaches contrary to that. You read those last 2 texts for us there, Rodrigo. You were the one that did all that.
Sure. So Christ was the sacrifice once to take away the sins of many, and he will appear a second time not to bear sin, but to bring salvation to those who are waiting for him. And in John 1:29 says, the next day John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Yeah. So that the Bible is self-explanatory.
I know. It's very clear. I think Andy Mack wrote in the comments somewhere there, I wish I could find it, just let go of Ellen altogether. There's no need. And let's say there was. Let's say there's some providential. Let's say Adventism has some gems there, like Sabbath but non-salvific, a culture that's wonderful. People are awesome. I love the Adventist community. And there's a lot of good people in there doing lots of great things. But you just don't need Ellen in there at all. But to do away with Ellen, you would have to do away with the church. That's probably.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I can say something, Peter. In Brazil, hundreds and hundreds of people are leaving the Seventh-day Adventists. The last report from the South American division was definitely not a good one, and people are very worried about that in South America. But the funny thing is, people are leaving and putting Ellen White on the side, putting Ellen White in a box, taking away all these doctrines of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. But they're always asking me, hey, Rodrigo, where should I go? Because I would like to. They say, I like to be in a place when people get together in the Sabbath during the Sabbath.
Yes.
I cannot have any other day. My day is Sabbath. And I say, that's great. That's great. Nobody here is criticizing your day of worship. Nobody here is telling nothing of this. But they cannot find a church. And we have just a few churches at the Seventh-day Baptists in Brazil. Unfortunately, they don't have a large network of churches. But some of them, they're looking to build churches, build communities that get together on Saturday and to, study the Bible, get together, play some music, but without any of these doctrines.
And look, maybe Stephen Beagles and Mitchell can start their own special gospel Adventist movement that is separate, but provides a place for all that we speak of.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, we're going to leave it there. So glad you got to make it on the show, Rodrigo. Just even to be able to say hi and catch up, really really enjoy our shows together, and I enjoy when Mitchell's on the show too. So I was a pig in mud today and had a great time. Thank you for watching, everybody.
Thank you,
Tomorrow,
guys.
keep me in your thoughts, because we're going to do a program on Charlie Kirk, and even having a show is going to call division. I want us to gather together tomorrow, prove that SDA can find common ground, even though the topic is potentially the most dividing I've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So look, keep me in your thoughts, and let's do it tomorrow. See you all. Thank you for your support. Thanks for your donations. Don't forget, if you'd like to make a small contribution, you can do so. Just go over to PayPal there, paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music, and you'll find me. And look, a couple of dollars would go a long way right now. Thank you. Till next time, see you soon, Rodrigo, and see you all tomorrow.